You ever think about marrying someone you're not in love with? There's no reason you can't do it. My grandma did it. My grandfather immigrated to the United States in 1917. War was breaking out in Europe. His father gave him 5 $20 gold pieces to help him come to the United States. He worked as a coal miner in Pennsylvania. After he became 30, he decided he wanted to be married. And he heard there were families back there in Yugoslavia who would send their daughters over if they paid the fare. So he contacted my great-grandparents who lived in what was then called Yugoslavia. My great-grandparents decided that if he would send enough money for the fare, that they would send their daughter, Angela. They sent their daughter to the New World. Back there were no immigration quotas. If you had enough money to buy the tickets, you went. They said goodbye to her. They never saw her again. They put her on a ship and sent her to the States to meet her husband. Okay? You say, that sounds mean. Yeah, it sounds mean to me too. But you got to realize, my mom's tried to help me. She said, hey, don't get mad at your great-grandparents. Europe was a tough place at this time, and it was considered a very kind thing to give your children the opportunity to live in this wonderful nation, the United States of America. So even though they did it with mixed emotion, they thought it was the best thing. My grandmother got on a ship. She got off the ship. She was met by a guy whom she married 1 month later. Was my grandmother in love with him? If she was, she never told anyone. She kept it secret. Okay? In fact, it wasn't a very good marriage. Because my grandfather was not just a coal miner. He was a drunken coal miner. He was a gambling coal miner. He was not a good gentleman at all. Okay? But I never heard my grandmother once say, you know, what a bummer I had to marry somebody I wasn't in love with, because people throughout history, you didn't think that way. Throughout history, people didn't fall in love and get married. That's the point I'm trying to make. The way we do it is really kind of a new thing. Boy meets girl. They fall in love. They get married. And I'm not saying it's wrong. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm simply saying because we do it that way doesn't make it right. My concern is that we have many Christians who fall in love and then get married thinking it's the right thing to do. And it never really occurs to them that in reality what they're doing is entering into a covenant relationship before God with one another to be lifelong companions. You say, well, what's true once you enter that relationship? Well, here's my third point, my final point, then I'll make some applications. A biblical marriage must include the choice to love, whether you are in love or not. In fact, the title of the message is Choosing to Love. You say, what do you mean? Well, most of you know Ephesians 5:25, husbands love your wives, even as Christ loved the church. I am married, I am commanded to love my wife, Nancy. You say, what if you don't feel like you're in love with her? It doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter. Okay, she's here. And I'm in, honey, I'm in love with you. Okay? But what I mean is, what I'm trying to say is I'm madly in love with her. But even if I weren't, which I'm sure will never be the case, but even if I weren't, I'm not allowed to say, God, I'm not going to love her anymore, because you only have to love when you're in love. No. God says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church. You say, does the wife ever commanded to love the husband? Titus 2:4 says the older women are to teach the younger women to be sober, to love their husbands. Now a different Greek word, but certainly a very related concept. Okay? You say, okay, so you're telling me there's a difference between being in love and choosing to love. That's correct. You say, what does it mean to be in love? Well, you think about it. Guys, how do you know you're in love? You know, you see a girl on campus and she's pretty. You find out that she's spiritual. She's pretty, right? Maybe she has a heart to serve the Lord. She's pretty, okay? Maybe she can play the piano. She's pretty, right? And every time you see her, what happens? All kinds of things happen, huh? In every part of your body. From your head to your toes, when you see her, life is different. You say, what's that called? We could call that biological, cognitive, emotional arousal. That's what we could call that, okay? It has to do with hormones, okay? And we're not going to talk a lot about that, so that's all right. But I'm just saying there's something going on there. You say, Dr. Mazak, what is it when I experience biological, cognitive, emotional arousal? It's arousal. Just call it arousal. Let's call it what it is. You say, it's love. It's not love. It's arousal. I'm not saying it's bad. Okay? Girls, maybe a similar type of thing. You meet a guy, and you get to know him, and you think, wow, what a great guy. He'd make a great husband, and, you you follow him a little bit, and you kind of bump into him by accident and stuff, and that type of thing. Because every time you're just with him, you just get a different feeling. Hey, I'm not saying that's bad, but that's not love. I've heard pastors stand up and say, I'll never forget when I first saw the girl I married. I walked in, I looked in the choir, and it was love at first sight. And I always think to myself, don't say that. I mean, you might as well just go out and get a T-shirt, get a magic marker, and write on it, I don't read my Bible. Because that's what you just told everybody. Right? Now, listen, I understand what's going through his mind. Because I am convinced that what most of us call love at first sight might be better termed, this might be a little too strong, lust at first sight. Or at least let's call it biological, cognitive, emotional arousal at first sight, okay? But it's not love. Because, see, love is a choice. You say, how do you know that? Let's go to the love chapter. You know where it's at. 1 Corinthians 13, please. The love chapter. Let's find out what God says about love. And the idea that love is a choice. Again, I'm making the point a biblical marriage must include the choice to love, whether you are in love or not. 1 Corinthians 13, and I'm sure all of us are familiar with this. We have the word charity beginning in verse 4, and the word charity we know we can translate as love, and thus I'll read it as love. Love suffereth long and is kind. Love envieth not. Love vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up. Let's just stop there. Love suffereth long, is kind. Have you ever found yourself falling into kindness? You say, it's the craziest thing. I walked, there was the choir, there she was, I looked, and I just fell into kindness. You can't fall into kindness. You got to choose to be kind. Why? Because love is a choice, right? Have you ever fallen into suffering long? You say, I came into class, and there she was. She was beautiful. What happened? I suffered long. Well, okay, but you know what I'm trying to say. Well, what I'm trying to say is, in the way it's meant here, right? You can't just choose. You can choose to be long-suffering. You can't fall into it. I go to verse 5. Love doth not behave itself unseemly. Here's one I want to get to. Seeketh not its own. What do we do when we quote-unquote fall in love? I want to meet her. I'm going to meet her after every class. I want to be with her. Hey, you want to do something? Want to play basketball tonight? No, I want to be with her. Why? It's what I want. What's that called? Seeking its own. But love seeketh not its own. Love is not demanding, I must be with you after every class. I will meet you right after chapel at the pole. I'll walk you over to lunch. We'll have lunch. I'll walk you to the next class. And then I'll try to get out early in my class, and I'll meet you to the next class, and I'm going to be with you all the time. Love is, hey, what's best for you? I choose to do that. Love is a choice. Do you see what I mean? There is a difference between choosing to love and being in love. That's what I'm trying to say this morning. And my concern is that we confuse these two concepts. And I know there's a lot more that could be said about this, and I hope I'm being clear, but because of time, let me make a number of applications. The first one that will be very applicable, I think, to you. Number one, before getting married, don't try to determine if you're in love. Decide if you're willing to choose to love. Should I marry him? He proposed to me. Well, Susie, do you love him? Mary, I don't know. Am I in love? How do you know? Is this love? I don't know. Don't ask that question. Do you choose to make a covenant before God to be a lifelong companion? Do you choose to love him forever? If you're in love, that's fine. If you're not in love, maybe that's okay too. But are you willing to make the choice? That's what you need to focus on. Rather than this introspective, selfish, self-focused, wow, this is the real thing, I'm in love. Okay?